The story begins not with a house, but with a sound. It is the sharp, metallic click of a lever-action rifle, a sound that echoed across the dusty plains and jagged mountains of the American frontier. In the mid-19th century, the Winchester repeating rifle was hailed as the gun that won the West. It was a marvel of modern engineering, capable of firing 15 shots in rapid succession without the need for constant reloading. For the Winchester family, this invention was a golden key that unlocked a door to unimaginable wealth. Oliver Winchester, the patriarch of the empire, watched as his bank accounts swelled with every conflict and every expansion of the young nation. However, this mountain of gold was built upon a foundation of lead and blood. For every dollar earned, a life had been taken somewhere in the wilderness. The legacy of the Winchester name was inseparable from the cold steel of the barrel and the smell of spent gunpowder. While the world saw the Winchesters as titans of industry, the reality within their grand New Haven home was beginning to crumble under the weight of a silent, creeping darkness. Sarah Winchester, the petite and highly intelligent wife of William Wirt Winchester, was the crown jewel of Connecticut high society. She was fluent in 4 languages, a talented musician, and possessed a mind as sharp as any scholar. But no amount of wealth or education could protect her from the tragedy that was about to strike. In the year 1866, Sarah gave birth to a beautiful daughter named Annie Pardee Winchester. The joy was short-lived. Just 6 weeks later, the infant succumbed to a devastating wasting disease known as marasmus. The nursery, once filled with hope, became a tomb of silence. Sarah was shattered, falling into a deep and agonizing depression that threatened to swallow her whole. The cruelty of fate did not stop there. 15 years later, in 1881, her husband Oliver died of tuberculosis, leaving Sarah alone with a fortune of $20 million and a daily income of $1,000. In the late 19th century, this was an astronomical sum of money, enough to buy anything her heart desired. Yet, as she sat in her silent mansion, Sarah felt nothing but a growing sense of dread. The silence of the house felt heavy, as if the air itself was thick with the weight of unseen observers. She began to feel that her family was not just unlucky, but cursed. She could almost hear the distant screams of those who had fallen at the end of a Winchester rifle. The guilt of her inheritance began to poison her mind, and she became convinced that a dark shadow was looming over her, waiting to claim her, just as it had claimed her child and her husband. Desperate for answers and fearing for her own life, Sarah traveled to Boston to consult a famous spiritualist medium. In the dim light of the seance room, the medium entered a trance and spoke with a voice that seemed to come from beyond the veil of the living. The message was terrifying. The medium revealed that the Winchester family was indeed haunted by a legion of spirits. These were the souls of everyone ever killed by a Winchester rifle, from soldiers on the battlefield to innocent people caught in the crossfire of the untamed West. Thousands upon thousands of angry ghosts were seeking vengeance against the woman who now held the blood-stained profits of their demise. The medium told Sarah that she was the next target of their restless fury. There was, however, one desperate way to survive. The medium delivered a chilling prophecy and a direct command from the spirit world. Sarah was told she must leave her home in the east and travel toward the setting sun. She was to find a place where the spirits led her and begin building a home for them. But there was a catch that would define the rest of her life. The construction must never, ever stop. The medium warned her that as long as the sound of hammers rang out, Sarah would remain safe. If the workers ever laid down their tools and the silence returned, the spirits would finally find her, and she would die. This ultimatum became the singular driving force of Sarah's existence. In the year 1886, Sarah arrived in the sun-drenched Santa Clara Valley of California. She purchased an uncompleted 8-room farmhouse on a large plot of land in San Jose. To the neighbors, she seemed like a typical wealthy widow looking for a fresh start. But the peace of the valley was quickly shattered. Sarah immediately recruited a massive team of carpenters, masons, and laborers. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The symphony of hammers began that very afternoon and did not falter. Sarah organized her crews into 3 separate shifts that worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There were no blueprints, no master plans, and no architects. There was only Sarah and the relentless noise of progress. The sound of saws cutting through redwood and the rhythmic thud of hammers driving nails became the heartbeat of the estate. The work continued through blinding summer heat, torrential winter storms, and even the most sacred holidays. To stop was to invite death, and Sarah had no intention of dying. As the farmhouse began to grow and swell like a living organism, Sarah added a very specific and mysterious feature to the center of the house. It was a private séance room, accessible only to her. Every night, exactly at the stroke of midnight, a servant would ring a large bell to summon the spirits. Sarah would then lock herself inside the room, dressed in a heavy black silk veil, to communicate with the dead. She believed that during these midnight sessions, the spirits provided her with the instructions for the next day's work. She would sketch these bizarre designs on scraps of paper or napkins, handing them to her confused foreman the following morning. The construction began to take on a strange and disturbing character. Rooms were added onto rooms and wings stretched out in directions that defied logic. The house was no longer a home, but a sprawling, wooden puzzle. As the structure reached toward the sky, Sarah began to realize that the entities she was speaking to in the dark were not just looking for a place to rest. They were demanding something far more chaotic. The designs were becoming increasingly nonsensical, with corridors that led nowhere and windows that looked into other rooms. It was as if the spirits were taking control of the very fabric of the house, weaving a trap that was as much for Sarah as it was for them. The house was changing, and the nightmare was only just beginning. As the months bled into years, the once modest farmhouse transformed into a sprawling, architectural fever dream that defied every known law of construction. The architecture of the Winchester house became a physical manifestation of pure madness, expanding in every direction with a frantic energy. Visitors who managed a rare glimpse of the exterior saw a jagged skyline of gables, towers, and chimneys, but the true insanity lay hidden deep within the walls. Sarah Winchester ordered the construction of doors that, when opened, revealed a sudden and terrifying 30-foot drop directly into the garden below. Grand staircases with ornate railings were built with painstaking care, only to terminate abruptly against a flat, solid ceiling. There were tiny secret passages that forced a grown man to crawl on his hands and knees to reach a dead end, and expensive Tiffany skylights installed in the floor rather than the roof. It was as if the very concept of a home had been inverted and twisted until it no longer served any human purpose. Yet beneath this frantic and nonsensical growth, Sarah's motivation was deeply layered. While she was undoubtedly driven by a paralyzing terror of the spirits, there was also a profound sense of moral duty that guided her hand. She did not just see these ghosts as monsters. She saw them as the tragic victims of her family's immense success. In her fractured and grieving mind, providing them with a sanctuary was an act of extreme compassion. She believed that by offering them a place to reside within her walls, she was paying a spiritual debt that could never truly be settled. This sense of penance transformed the construction from a mere survival tactic into a lifelong mission of redemption. She was the architect of a wooden purgatory, a massive halfway house for the restless souls that the Winchester repeating rifle had sent to the other side. As the house grew in size and complexity, Sarah herself began to vanish from the world, retreating behind a dark veil of absolute isolation. She was rarely seen without a heavy black silk veil covering her face and shoulders, a garment she wore even when she was alone inside her own home. To the curious townspeople of San Jose, she became a ghost herself, a phantom widow presiding over a haunted castle that never stopped changing. Her refusal to engage with the living world was absolute. In the year 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt traveled through California and expressed a desire to visit the famous widow and her eccentric mansion. Even for the leader of the nation, Sarah would not break her routine. She simply refused to receive him, leaving the President of the United States standing at the iron gates while she remained hidden deep within her labyrinth. She had no interest in the living. Her obligations lay entirely with the dead. The blueprints for this ever-expanding maze did not come from any earthly architect or professional designer. They came from the whispers of the beyond. Every single night, as the grandfather clocks struck midnight, the great bell on the grounds would toll, signaling the start of Sarah's communication with the spirits. She would enter the seance room, a specialized chamber known as the Blue Room, which was designed to focus the energy of the spirit world. There, surrounded by the heavy silence of the night, she would receive the next day's orders from the entities that haunted her. In the morning, she would present her foreman with strange sketches drawn on whatever was at hand, often simple napkins or scraps of stationery. These drawings were bizarre and lacked any structural logic, but the foreman never questioned the widow's commands. He had learned that to question Sarah was to question the spirits themselves. If a wall needed to be built in the middle of a grand hallway, it was built. If an entire room needed to be sealed off, it was done without a moment of hesitation. Parallel to this architectural chaos was Sarah's growing obsession with the number 13. It became a powerful talisman in her desperate fight against the dark entities. She demanded that almost every physical aspect of the house reflect this number to create a spiritual shield. There were exactly 13 hooks in the seance room where she hung her different robes. The magnificent Tiffany glass windows were often designed with 13 precious stones or 13 distinct sections of glass. Even the functional and mundane elements of the house were not spared from this rule. Sinks were fitted with custom drains featuring 13 holes, and many ceilings were constructed with exactly 13 separate wooden panels. To Sarah, the number 13 was not a sign of bad luck, but a protective barrier, a numeric code that she hoped might confuse or ward off the most malevolent spirits seeking her soul. The psychological toll of this endless construction and the constant vigilance was immense. The rhythmic hammering of dozens of men and the constant smell of sawdust in the air would have driven a lesser mind to total collapse. But for Sarah, the noise was her only true comfort. It was the mechanical sound of her own heartbeat, a constant sign that she was still alive and protected by the medium's prophecy. She viewed the sprawling house not just as a sanctuary, but as a giant, wooden trap for the supernatural. She believed that if she made the layout confusing enough, the angry ghosts would become lost in the maze of overlapping hallways and blind doors, unable to find their way to her private quarters at the heart of the mansion. She was playing a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek with thousands of invisible enemies, using wood and nails as her only weapons of defense. Then, in the early morning hours of April 18, 1906, the earth itself seemed to rise up against her. At exactly 5:12 in the morning, the catastrophic San Francisco earthquake struck the valley with a violence that defied description. The massive mansion, which had grown to a height of 7 stories in some places, groaned and buckled under the immense tectonic pressure. The top floors, including the majestic observation tower, collapsed into a heap of twisted timber and broken glass. Sarah was asleep in her favorite bedroom when the walls began to shake with a roar like a steam engine and the ceiling rained down upon her bed. She was trapped in the suffocating darkness, pinned by the very structure she had built for her protection. As the ground continued to tremble and the house screamed around her, Sarah did not see this as a natural disaster. To her, it was a terrifying sign from the other side. She was convinced that the spirits were no longer satisfied with her offerings. The earthquake was a physical manifestation of their furious wrath, a sign that her labyrinth had failed, and the ghosts were finally coming through the walls to claim her. The dust from the 1906 earthquake still hung thick in the air when the frantic cries of the workers began to echo through the splintered remains of the mansion. They dug through the debris of the collapsed 4th story, moving heavy beams with a desperation born of both loyalty and fear. When they finally reached the bedroom where Sarah had been sleeping, they found the widow huddled in the corner, miraculously unhurt. The heavy wooden frame of her bed had acted as a shield against the falling ceiling. But while her body was intact, the psychological damage was absolute. She emerged from the ruins not with relief but with a terrifying clarity. To Sarah, the earthquake was not a natural disaster. It was a targeted strike from spirits angry that she had spent too much time on the beauty of the front section of the house. They did not want a palace, they wanted a sanctuary that reflected their own fractured existence to the other side. Following this omen, Sarah immediately ordered the entire front section of the mansion to be boarded up permanently. She refused to repair the grand ballrooms or the elegant parlors damaged by the tremors. Instead, workers sealed the doors with heavy timber, leaving shattered furniture and cracked mirrors exactly where they had fallen. Those rooms became a tomb for the past, trapped in time from the moment the earth shook. For the remaining 16 years of her life, no one would set foot in those spaces. Sarah shifted her obsession toward the horizontal reaches of the property. The construction became even more frantic, but the goals had changed. She no longer sought to impress the spirits with grand architecture. She sought to confuse them with raw complexity that defied the laws of logic. The new additions were a testament to a mind that had abandoned the rules of the living world. Builders were ordered to create hallways that narrowed until they were impassable, and staircases with steps only 2 inches high that wound in serpent-like spirals. She had chimneys built that stopped inches before the roofline and closets that opened into solid brick walls. Every bizarre decision was a new layer in the defensive shield she was weaving around her soul. She was no longer just building a home. She was building a riddle that even the dead could not solve. The house became a sprawling trap of wood and glass, designed to keep vengeful souls wandering in circles forever. As Sarah entered her late 70s, a strange peace settled over the estate. The frantic energy of her middle years softened into a somber, quiet acceptance. The house had become her universe, a wooden ecosystem where she was both the creator and the prisoner. She no longer spoke of the spirits with sharp terror. Instead, she viewed the labyrinth as her eternal monument of penance and redemption. She had given every dollar and every waking hour to these restless souls. She spent her final days wandering the halls she knew by heart, a tiny figure in black lace. The sound of hammers, once a source of anxiety, became a soothing lullaby that assured her the spiritual debt was finally being paid. On the night of September 4th, 1922, the great bell on the grounds tolled for the final time. Sarah retired to her bedroom, a modest chamber at the heart of the maze. In the early hours of September 5th, 1922, Sarah Winchester passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82. She died exactly as she had lived for 38 years, surrounded by the constant, rhythmic thud of construction. But as word of her passing spread, something unprecedented happened. The hammers stopped. The saws went quiet. The constant energy of the estate vanished, replaced by an eerie, heavy silence. For the first time since 1886, the house was still. The air, once filled with the scent of fresh sawdust, became stagnant and cold. When the movers and executors arrived, they were quickly overwhelmed by the madness of the layout. They found themselves wandering in circles, getting lost in a maze of over 160 rooms and 40 staircases. They discovered doors that opened into empty air and secret passages hidden behind cabinets. They found 10,000 windows and 2,000 doors, many leading nowhere. Today, the Winchester Mystery House remains a chilling and beautiful testament to a woman who sacrificed everything for the ghosts of her past. It is a place where history and hauntings collide. It is a monument to the price of guilt and the lengths one will go to find peace. Sarah Winchester is gone, but her labyrinth remains, a silent sanctuary for the souls she spent her life trying to appease.